Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah. This week we began Torah portion Miketz, translated at the end. This is found in Bereshit or Genesis chapter 41, verse 1 through 44 and verse number 17. Translation at the end. Whatever we find in this Torah portion then should lend itself somewhat to an understanding of last day correlations. So let's begin by asking a question. Who is Israel? Batya Wooten wrote a wonderful book asking that same question. I have it here in my library. Encourage you to pick it up and read it if you haven't already. You may, in regards to that question, get at least a couple of answers. One, most commonly people will say, well, Israel is the Jews. And they would be right to a large extent. The other answer that you might receive, depending on their doctrinal orientation, based on replacement theology, they may say, well, in today's economy or according to the New Testament, it's no longer the Jews, it's the church. A totally erroneous answer that bears no merit whatsoever. The Jews indeed play a tremendous role in the identity of Israel. Absolutely. They have endured, they have persevered, they have overcome, they have fought against assimilation, they have done all that is necessary to remain a separate, distinct people. And they are worthy of all recognition and applause and acceptance for that. However, in the reading of this Torah portion, we find that there is another individual beyond Yehuda who plays an extremely significant role. Indeed, he is the central character for the remainder of the book of Bereshit. That one, of course, is Yoseph. The house of Yoseph is today comprised of 10 tribes, so scattered, so assimilated, so thoroughly chewed up and mixed in, digested among the nations, that most of his house has no idea who they are or what role that they would have to play. Those of us in the Hebraic roots community, we're just now beginning to find out the significance of who we are and what it is that we're supposed to do. If we can ever get beyond the initial beginnings of our infightings and issues with one another and actually get focused on the things that the Father has called us to, we have a significant role to play in the earth and indeed in the last days. But let's continue. I'd like to direct your thoughts to some writings from Rav Kook. If you've not read Rav Kook, I encourage you to do so. He's freely available in his writings online, Kook, a phenomenal commentator pertaining to Torah and Jewish life, now gone and missing from us, but his writings have persevered and available to us. He says, and I quote, "The strife among Jacob's sons centered on two conflicting viewpoints vis-a-vis the sanctity of the Jewish people. He says, Judah felt that we needed to act according to the current reality and that given the present situation, the Jewish people need to maintain a separate existence from other nations in order to safeguard their unique heritage, and that they have done. Joseph, he says, on the other hand, believed that we should focus on the final goal. We need to take into account the hidden potential of the future era, where nations will walk by your light, Isaiah 60, verse 3. Thus, according to Joseph, even nowadays we are responsible for the spiritual elevation of all peoples." So we come down to a comparative analysis. Are we to engage in Judah's pragmatic nationalism, separatism, defense against assimilation, remaining distinctly a set-apart, unique people? Or are we to follow Joseph's visionary nationalism? By that, the idea that we would spread abroad the word of the coming kingdom, and that we would not only make people aware that the kingdom is coming, the Messiah is about to appear, but that we would help them to become prepared for that. The answer is It's most often the case with these kind of questions. The answer is yes. Yes, that's exactly right. We are to become and remain a set-apart people under the Most High, set apart from this present world system that is around us. That doesn't mean that even though you and I were not born into a Jewish home, at least most I would assume of this audience that would be the case, that we are to somehow adopt their language, culture, their world perspective, and just become converted and adopted into the Jewish people in order to become Am Israel. I believe that through the blood of Messiah Yeshua and through our redemption in Him, that we are indeed grafted in, Romans chapter 11, and that we are now part of Am Israel. We do not replace a single Jew in order for that to take place. We do not shove them over from where they rightfully belong. We are to be engrafted alongside them, and we are to bear the same kind of fruit. That being said, we cannot be isolationist. We cannot so pull ourselves back from the world that is around us that we have no part to play in it, no role to accept in it, and no influence within it. So it comes down to that tricky walk before us. How do we remain a set-apart people, righteous in the eyes of the Most High, living as Messiah lived, and yet have righteous influence on the world that is around us? Not easily done. Rav Kook continues on in his analysis of this question. And he notes that according to the Zohar, Benjamin complimented his brother Joseph. Rachel gave birth to two Zedekim, two righteous men, this line of thought says. Joseph and Benjamin. That Yosef was the higher of the Siddiqs, and that is that he brought down the divine influence and presence to this world. But it is Benjamin that somehow enables that then to be diffused to the world that is around us. How did Benjamin do this? There is a physical land bridge between the tribal lands of Ephraim, the house of Yosef, and the tribal lands of Yehuda, the house of Yehuda. That land bridge is none other than the tribal land of Benjamin, where, in large part, the Temple Mount is included. Remember that Yah's house is to be a house of prayer for all nations. Somehow, you and I, as a part of the house of Yosef, need to be involved effectively in an endeavor of prayer to where you and I have righteous influence on those that we encounter, whether it's family members, co-workers, people in the marketplace, someone we just happen to run into somewhere. That they see our lives, that they hear our words, that they perceive our heart, and that whatever it is that we have, they desire to have that along with us. Now, that's not probably going to happen in a moment or a one-chance encounter. But as you and I develop relationship with others, that we are hoping that we have some sense of righteous influence over them. If we're isolated, if we're so pulled back into a state of being a spiritual hermit, living in a spiritual environment that we are afraid to step outside of, we will never have a chance to influence them. If we are no different than they, if we walk the same as they do, speak the same as they do, act as they do, then there's no difference between us. There is that fine line in the middle where Messiah walked righteously, one hand holding the hand of the Father in heaven and the other hand reaching out to the needs of those that were around him, healing the sick, raising up the infirm, causing people to be encouraged, giving hope, giving wisdom, teaching the truth. And so must we be. Be Yosef, who seizes his opportunity, One hand reaching up and one hand reaching out. Until tomorrow, shalom.